All right, 1 second here. All right, welcome everyone. Holding by the book of Leviticus, chapter 16, verse 4. Again, want to welcome everyone. Holding by the book of Leviticus, chapter 14. And we're speaking about last number of weeks about the sin of the two sons of Aaron Cohen. And now we sort of started about having Aaron come into the sanctuary with the bull and all that. We spoke about that, sin offering, why it says the sin offering and an oil offering, i.e. a burnt offering, etc. So the Torah continues. Again, the book of Leviticus, chapter 16, verse 4. And the Torah says, Ketoines, Bad, Kodesh, Yilbash, Milknase, Bad, Yiyu, Al Basaro, Avne, Bad, Yachor, Nefes, Bad, Yitzo, Big Kodesh, Rachas, Bamaim, it's Basaro Levation. So here, the Torah says, okay, so when it comes to serve over here, talking about on Yom Kippur, he's going to don, what he's going to wear? Ketones bad. A sacred linen of ketones. We'll see what that is. Miknasayim shall be upon his flesh. Miknasayim, normally we say our pants. He's going to have pants on that'll cover his flesh. He shall gird himself with a little a linen avnate. We'll see what that is, and cover his head with a linen mitznefes. Mitznefes, we're going to learn over here is a head covering. See what exactly that is. They are sacred garments, right? The sacred garments he's going to wear, and then he's going to immerse his flesh in the water, and then don them, right? So he's going to go to the mikveh on the same day, right? Meaning on Yom Kippur, and he's going to, after he goes to the mikveh, he's going to wear these clothes. He's going to wear these clothes. He's going to serve, right? He's going to serve in the temple, in the Beis Hamikdash, what the temple was going to become, or what the tabernacle, the Mishkan, what it was going to become, etc. So we're getting into, and I guess we'll be on this for a while. We're getting into how the Kohen Gadol, how the high priest is going to serve, what he's going to wear on Yom Kippur, right? That's what we're going to, that's what we're going to get. So says Rashi over here, and we always look at Rashi first. Rashi says, what is this kutones? Right, the sacred linen, kutones. Rashi tells us that he's not going in right now within the Holy of Holies. Right, he's preparing over here. He's not going in the Holy of Holies in the 8 garments in which he serves outside the Holy of Holies. Right, so there's a term over here inside. There's a term outside. Right, so the term inside over here means the inside service, which means that the high priest is going to serve in the Holy of Holies. Now, there are certain things that are unique to Yom Kippur, such as sprinkling the bloods, etc. We're going to see, casting of lots for the goats, that we're going to see, etc. Now, there are 8 garments that a Kohen Gadol wears, that the high priest wears at certain times. And these 8 garments, he only wears outside the Holy of Holies. He doesn't wear them inside the Holy of Holies. Why not? Why wouldn't the high priest over here wear it on the inside? Right? Why should it matter? The Rashi says, or even before we get there, so we mentioned, about inside. We mentioned that the Kohen Gadol is going to serve in the Holy of Holies. But outside means, what does outside of the Holy of Holies mean? It means, it refers to the entire Beis HaMikdash in the courtyard except for the Holy of Holies. So anywhere outside of the Holy of Holies, that's why it's called the outside service. That service is not necessarily unique to Yom Kippur. It could be unique to other things, other types of sacrifices, not necessarily Yom Kippur. So if you look at chapter 28, book of Exodus, talks about these garments. But the point is, these 8 garments are not worn by the high priest in the Holy of Holies. Why not? Because Rashi says, Ein kategor nasa sanegor, which means the prosecutor does not become the defense counselor. Meaning, what does the Gemara tell me? Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, page 26a. What does it tell me over there? It said, what does gold represent? What does gold represent? Gold represents or brings to mind the sin of the golden calf. Now, therefore, since it smacks of the sin of the golden calf, and it speaks against Israel, against the Jewish people for what they did. So, how can he wear gold? That's going to act as a prosecutor. So, therefore, he can't appear in Yom Kippur. The Kohen Gadol, when he performs a special service within the Holy of Holies, because he's there to defend Israel. He's there to atone. So if he's there to atone for the Jewish people for the sins they've done, how can he wear gold? Gold smells of what? Sin of the golden calf. You tell me, his sin was minimal. His sin was minimal over here. Very hard to understand exactly what his sin was. That he did, the commentaries, bent over backwards to say basically it was something not even worthy of a sin offering, of something he did by accident. It was even less than that. Right? So some say, since he was delaying for Moshe Rabbeinu to come back, he shouldn't have done that at his level. Very hard to understand. Well, what's the point? The 8 vestments that he's going to wear of gold, he's not going to do it inside the Holy of Holies. Now, why isn't he not going to do it in the Holy of Holies? Because comes Aaron a Kohen, comes the high priest, and the high priest is going to be the defender of the Jewish people. But how can he be a defender of the Jewish people if the gold he wears is going to accuse? The gold is going to accuse. Because the gold over here, what's going to happen? The gold is going to come along and say, hey, what about the sin of the golden calf? What do you do about that? What do you do with the sin of the golden calf? So here Rashi says, as it brings down from the Talmud in Rosh Hashanah, 26a, ain't categor, not says senegor. Prosecutor cannot be the defense. Because here's the high priest, right? Aaron Cohen's going to come in. He's going to go in the Holy of Holies to atone for the Jewish people. He's going to defend the Jewish people. Comes on the gold, that's the accuser. It's going to accuse the high sin of the golden calf. Right? So therefore, the prosecutor can't be the defense counselor. So he can't go in wearing those vestments. So what does he serve with? What does he go in when he goes into the Holy of Holies? He serves in 4 garments, not in the golden garments. Right? He serves like an ordinary Kohen. And all of them are made of linen. Right? As the Medrash says. Right? That's what an ordinary Kohen is going to wear when he serves. As we see in Exodus chapter 28, verses 40 and 42. But the sash, the avnates, according to one opinion, what did it contain? It contained wool. So the Kohen Gadol's 4 garments were all pure linen. I've got an issue over here. How going to be made of wool, according to this opinion? Can't have wool and linen together. Right? Can't have wool and linen together. If you can't have wool and linen together, how can he serve? How can he serve with wool and linen? So the special dispensation for the Kohen Gadol, for the high priest, that he's allowed to serve. He's allowed to serve even with shatnez, even with wool and linen. Right? That's what it sounds like over here. But the point is, he's going to serve like an ordinary Kohen. He's only going to wear the 4 garments. Can't wear all 8. Can't wear the golden garments. Golden garments going to be accusatory. He's coming in defense, so he can't bring something he's going to accuse. So says Rashi, he's going to stand out like a regular Kohen. Sorry, not stand out. He's going to be like a regular Kohen. And he's not going to be wearing gold. He's the high priest. He's going in the Holy of Holies. Very good. But he can't wear golden clothing. So he's going to serve. He's going to look like an ordinary Kohen, even though he's serving in the Holy of Holies. That's the first. Now, says Rashi further, the Torah tells me he's going to don a sacred linen ketones. What does that mean? That it shall belong to Hekdesh. What does it mean it's going to belong to Hekdesh? The property of the Beis Hamikdash. The property of the temple itself. Now, what's he saying over here? Well, what's he saying over here? The Torah tells me he's going to don a sacred linen, this ketones. This ketones. Now, if it's being used to serve in the temple, what would I assume? My assumption is, once it's being used to serve in the temple, it's temple property. That would be the assumption. I mean, I think that would be pretty obvious. In other words, if you're using something in the Beis Hamikdash, or what later became the temple and the Mishkan, it's sanctified. It's sanctified for that purpose. It can only be used for holy things. If it can only be used for holy things in the temple, okay. That's what Rashi tells me. It belongs to Hekdesh. Right? These garments are sacred. But again, if Rashi didn't tell me that, or the Torah didn't tell me that, wouldn't I already know that? I may already know that. The Torah, so again, the Torah tells me he's going to don a sacred linen. Well, what else is he going to don over here? What else is he going to wear? It's going to be something that's sanctified. Something that belongs to the temple. And if it wasn't, if it just says he's gonna wear this linen, and it's not sanctified, okay? So what? What if it's not sanctified? Right? Maybe I'd say it does not need to be sanctified. But if it's for the temple, it doesn't have to be special. Should be special. Right? It comes on the Torah, and the Torah tells me he's going to wear this sacred linen. Comes on Rashi. He says, who does it belong to? Beis Hamikdash, sacred property. Can't misuse it. Can't now use this sacred linen. You know, he wants to use it, I don't know, blow his nose. Wants to use it to wipe himself off. Can't do that. Why? Because it's an everyday usage. If a Kohen, misappropriates something, uses, let's say better, he uses a sacred article that's sanctified for the temple. What does he use it for? For everyday usage. That's a Torah prohibition. It's called Me'ilah. Right? That's called Me'ilah. And we'll speak about Me'ilah one day we get there. But that's called Me'ilah. You're not allowed to misappropriate. If it belongs to the temple, it's going to use it for temple purposes. Comes on the Torah and says it's going to be sacred. Rashi says, what does it mean it's sacred? It means it belongs to the temple. Right now, we already know, right? We know these garments are sacred. Why? Because the Torah tells me these are sacred garments. So, very good. If they're sacred, don't I know it belongs to the temple? I should already know it belongs to the temple. If I already know it belongs to the temple, what is Rashi telling me? Because it says over here, it says this linen right? This linen is sacred, right? It's a sacred garment. Right now, what's it juxtaposed over here? Right? It says ketona's bad, right? This ketona is made out of linen. And then it says kodesh yilbash. It's holy, and he shall wear it. So what's that coming to teach us? That when he wears it, it already has to be holy. It has to be sanctified. That is, it has to be purchased from the funds of the Beis Hamikdash. It cannot be purchased by Aaron's own money. So let's say Aaron wanted to buy it himself. He wanted to buy it with his own money. And he goes and buys this cloak, whatever. So he uses his own money. Okay? So what if he uses, is he allowed to do that? Over here we say no. It has to be sacred when he wears it. It cannot come from Aaron's money himself. Now, the Mishnah tells me, anyone wants to look it up, it's in Yuma 34b, and that is the set amount was used for sacred funds for these garments. It was money the temple had, and the money they used for different things. One thing they used it for over here is sacred garments. So therefore, in order for them to be sacred, they have to be used with sacred money. What sacred money? Sacred money comes from the temple. It comes from the coffers of the temple. Now, if the Kohen wanted to, he could donate his own money to the temple, right, to the temple treasury, so that more expensive garments could be made for him. He could do that. Now, that's temple money, but he can't use his own money. That's the point. The point is that when he puts on this garment's already holy. This garment is already sacred because it's been bought with sacred money. Money that was donated to the temple. Aaron the Kohen comes along and says, I want to use my own money. So we say, too bad. Can't use your own money. You have to use money that's already sanctified. It's already given over to the temple. Oh, you want to give the money to the temple and use it for that and then do it? Okay, different issue. But if it's his own money, it hasn't been sanctified, can't do it. That's what Rashi's coming to. That it already has to be sanctified. And if it wasn't sanctified, can't wear it. Not only that, it can't come from his own money. It has to come from the coffers of the temple itself. That's where it has to come from. You know, so explains Rashi over here. All right, that's what Rashi means. Because otherwise, why is Rashi telling me? Right, because the Torah tells me he shall wear a sacred linen. This ketonas. He should wear it. Don't I know? Don't I already know that if he's going to wear it, it should be sacred? Right? Should belong to the temple. Rashi's not adding anything over here. But he is. Because Rashi's telling you that it has to be holy from the get-go. The money used has to come from the temple to buy it in order for the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, to wear it. It has to have that level of sanctification before he wears it. If it doesn't have that sanctification, can't wear it. Right? It wouldn't be allowed to wear it. Says Rashi further, and he'll cover his head. He shall, shall cover his head. Because here the Torah says, he shall gird himself with a linen avnate, like a belt, I guess, and cover his head with a linen mitznefes. The Rashi says the word is to be understood like the Aramaic translation. Like Unkelos. What does Unkelos say? Unkelos says he places it upon his head. Just as Unkelos, the Targum says, and she puts his garments, use the same root. Genesis chapter 39, verse 16. Uses the same root as to put on, right? To put on his head over here. Right? So Rashi is going according to the Aramaic translation. And at the end, we're going to see there's a little bit of problem over here. But the Aramaic translation says he wears it on his head. He placed it on his head. Now, it says over here, umitznefes, gonna wear this on his head. Bad yitznoi. Right? Something that seems to cover his head. Now, the word sanof over here, or yitzno, the root of the word is sadi nun pei, or face or feet, if you want to call it that. Right? The word soinef over here means covering something away that totally covers, totally encompasses. That's how Rashi explains, Isaiah chapter 22, verse 18. Right? It covers the whole head. That's what it sounds like. Encompasses the whole head. But it can't mean that here. Why not? Because here the mitznefes didn't cover the whole head. Didn't cover the whole head of the high priest. Because if you look at Rashi, what does Rashi say? Book of Exodus, chapter 28, verse 37. That this mitznefes rested on the crown of his head. So that means it could not have covered his whole head. It rested on the crown. So therefore, Rashi explains, according to Onkelos, that in our verse it means placed upon the head. It doesn't mean it totally encompasses. Even though that's really the connotation over here. That's really the connotation. It really means to encompass, but it can't mean that here in general. Cannot mean that. Why? Because if you look at what Rashi says in Exodus chapter 28, verse 37, it rested on the crown. Now, if it rests on the crown, guess what? It's not on the head. It's not covering, it's not covering the entire head. Or it can mean another explanation. It can possibly mean that it's used as a verb to wrap something around one's head in the manner of a turban. It could be used that way. So here Rashi explains that what is a mitznefes? It's placed on the head, but it's not wrapped around. There are a few different ways to explain what this word means. Right, again, it's a little bit problematic. Either you tell me it means covering something entirely, but that's not the case over here. Or you're telling me it means that, it covers the head like a turban, but that's not the case here either. So there are a number of definitions over here, but Rashi says, you know what it means? To place on the head. We don't go according to the normal definition Rashi has in other places. Why not? Because it doesn't fit over here. Totally doesn't fit. Right? So Rashi explains it means sitting on the head. Right? For a number of reasons we explain. And we're going to see other commentaries going to argue over here. They're going to argue in this explanation of the Targum, of Onkelos, this Aramaic translation. We'll see. That's the end of the verse. These are sacred garments, right? These are sacred garments, right? And these are sacred garments. And he shall immerse his flesh, immerse his flesh in the water. And then he's going to put them on. Right? So what's he going to do? They're all sacred, but before he puts them on, he's going to go to the mikveh. Right? He's going to go to the mikveh over here. He's going to have to immerse. So Rashi says, when is this all taking place? Rashi says immersing himself in the water means on Yom Kippur. He's going to wash on Yom Kippur. Right? He requires immersion. Each time he changes clothing. Now I'm going to have to see exactly the order and what's going on over here. But basically 5 times he's going to change his clothing. And therefore each time he's going to have to go to the mikveh. They have to understand it's not going to be so warm over here. Right? So they heated up floor for him so he wouldn't freeze. But he's changing his clothing 5 times. The Rashi says 5 times he changed his clothing. When he would go from the surface of the inside, i.e., from performing parts of the service which was done inside the Holy of Holies to the service of the outside. Right? In other words, he went from the outside to the inside to the outside. Every time he had to change his clothes. And then he would have to go to the mikveh. And from the outside service to the inside, either way. If he went from outside to inside to outside, he's going to change his clothes, he has to go to the mikveh. So he would change for garments of gold, used for parts of the service performed outside, which we mentioned before, outside the Holy of Holies. The garments of white linen used for the parts of the service inside the Holy of Holies. Can't use gold. Not allowed to use gold on the inside. We mentioned that earlier. And for garments of white back to garments of gold. Right? So again, white to gold, gold to white, had to immerse. Inside, outside, had to immerse. And at each change of clothing, right, as we mentioned, he's got to immerse. And there are two sanctifications, the hands and the feet. Right? And you have to see Acts chapter 30, verse 19, exactly what that means. Right? Sanctification of the hands and the feet. But the point over here is that how much immersion takes place? 5 times. 5 times over here. So anyone who went to the courtyards, anyone who went to the outer courtyards has to immerse in the mikveh first. So all Kohanim, including the Kohen Gadol, have to immerse themselves before they enter the courtyard every day. That's the first thing. Now, we're not talking about that. Right? That we're not talking about. But since the Torah here tells me he had to wash his flesh in water and then wear the garments, it refers to immersion where there's a precondition. What's the precondition? What's the precondition? That he's going to go inside, outside, whatever, and he's going to have to wash. Right? He's going to have to immerse himself. So here we understand Kohen Gadol immersed himself every time he changed garments. Right? That's the point here. Every time he changed inside, outside, gold, linen, he had to immerse. Right? 100% he had to immerse. So each changing of clothing, we mentioned, he requires immersion to sanctification of the hands and the feet from the laver, from the kior, as it is known. Now, what was the kior? Kior is a water-filled vessel where the Kohen washed. Right? The basin. That's what it sounds like. The basin where he sanctified their hands and their feet. Right? That, you want to see the procedure, go over to Exodus chapter 30, verses 17 to 21. Right? Over there speaks about it, etc. So therefore, he sanctifies the hand and the feet. And he did this twice with each changing of garments. Once before removing the ones he was wearing, once after donning the ones that are fresh. Right? So it's going back and forth. Well, the point is, there's a procedure. 5 times. 5 times he's going to have to do this. Now, interesting enough, the Torah says, we mentioned before, these are sacred garments. That's what the Torah tells me. And then the Torah says he's got to immerse himself and then wash them. Now, what is the obvious question in that? Rashi tells me it's talking about how many times he's got to immerse. But the Torah doesn't tell me anything. The Torah just says he has to immerse his flesh in water. How many times would I assume that is? I would assume that means once. I don't need to assume it's more than once. I can assume it only means once. Right, but Rashi tells me from other sources more than once. Right, 5 times. So again, what would the Karaites over here say? Not that we really care. Karaites only believe in the written law. So what would they say? You only have to immerse once. That's what the Karaites would say. Rabbis say no. Every time he changes clothes, he's got to immerse. Every time he goes from inner to outer, he's got to immerse. Right? From holier to less holy, he's got to immerse. From less holy to holy, he's got to immerse. Greater clothes to lesser clothes, same thing. The Karaites say not that way. Let him immerse once. So what if he changes clothes? So what if he goes into a higher level of holiness? Right? They're going to say it doesn't matter. They're going to say, who cares? Right? It only says he's got to do it once. He shall immerse his flesh in the water, period. Interesting enough, it doesn't tell me anything either. It just says it's going to immerse in water. Well, what type of water? Can you go to the ocean? What type of water? It doesn't tell me. It doesn't tell me it's the mikvah. Right? Maybe, go to some river, some brook. I don't know. Go somewhere else. Immerse. Let them take buckets of water. Pour them over it. Right? In that immersion, that could be called immersion also. Right? But the Torah is not giving me a definition. Right? So we always pick on the Karaites when we can. In the sense, the Torah doesn't give me a definition, which is probably about 80, 90%. So then what does the Torah mean? How do I know what it means? I need oral law. You're right. You need oral law. Because you don't have oral law, you don't know what this means. You know what it means to immerse in the water. Now, simple explanation, maybe we'd all agree, immerse his flesh means without clothing. Right? It means he has to be naked. Right? That probably we can all assume. Some can say, come on, he immerses anyway. Immerses his flesh. Could be with clothing also. Right? Probably not. Most would probably agree it's not what it means. But again, we don't have definitions. The Torah needs definitions. Tell me what to do. I don't know what to do over here. Gives me minimal things. So Karaite's going to have to come up with their own explanation. They're going to have to come up with their own magic. Right? What this means. So to speak. We say over here, it's going to cover his head, his whole head, entire head, partial, doesn't tell me. Right? Also, no definition. He's going to gird himself with a linen avnei. What is that? How big does it have to be? Doesn't tell me anything. Right? Without getting information, how do I know what to do? So, they'll come up with their own explanation. And they'll have their own quote unquote oral law, what it means. According to them. But obviously, we have our own oral law. That's what I want to point out. Right? A lot of these things we don't know. Unless the Torah tells me. The commentaries tell me. Right? So explains Rashi over here. Now, comes on to Ibn Ezra. Ibn Ezra over here says, it mentions the ketones that's made out of linen. But it doesn't mention the ephod, the breastplates, the me'il, the jackets. It doesn't mention the other four. What happened to them? Why is it only mentioned? Why is it only mentioned avnei, mitznefes? What happened to the others? Right? And the ketones, and the miknasayim, only mentioned four. Right? We already know there's 8. So what happened to the other 4? What would be the obvious answer? I already mentioned before. They already mentioned before. It doesn't, Torah doesn't have to mention over here. So even Ezra says, I already mentioned it. In Exodus chapter 28, verse 35. See, I have other information. When I look at the other information, what does it tell me? Right? What does it tell me over here? It tells me that I already know this. If I already know this comes on the Torah, doesn't have to tell me. Torah doesn't have to tell me. I already mentioned it before. Right? So explains Ibn Ezra. Comes along the Ramban. Comes along Nachmanides over here. And Nachmanides says they're holy, right? Like Rashi says. They have to be sacred. They have to be sacred before he puts them on. Then they belong to the temple. So he says, I only know it by this. I only know this by these four. How do I know? But they have the big day kahuna. The other vestments of the Kohen Gadol. How do I know they also have to be sacred before he puts them on? He says, because it says big day kodesh hang. They are sanctified. What does it mean they're sanctified? They got to be holy before he wears them. But he says, since I already know these four have to be holy, I can extrapolate and say the other four also. They have to be holy before he put them on. So then he says, okay, let's go according to simple explanation. So he says, if you look at the book of Exodus, chapter 28, verse 4, it says, Asu big day kodesh l'Aaron achiv. You should make these holy vestments for Aaron, your brother. How many vestments? 8. Although, these begodim, these clothing, these vestments, are also holy. They're also holy. Right? I know from there. So therefore, I can learn out very simple. Since I know they're already holy, so I don't have to mention it. We know. Right? It's something we already know. So then he brings down. What does it mean? He says, wore them. He girded himself with this mitznefes. And he wore this thing on his head. Because the Medrash says, interesting enough, that it's coming to include all other vessels that are allowed to be used before sundown. In other words, use them in the morning goods, right? But it should be used before sundown. Now, then he brings down Rashi, and he says, what does yitznoif mean? Yitznoif means to cover the head, right? Or let's say better, to put it on your head, right? That's what it means. Because in Genesis chapter 39, verse 16, right, use a similar language. The Aramaic translation also uses similar language. It comes along, the Ramban says, I don't understand. So I don't understand Uncle over it. Because the word yitznof, sadi nun, fei sofit, what does it mean? It means to surround. We said there are different definitions. It could mean to totally surround, one definition. Right? It could mean also, what's the other definition? To encompass, right? That was one definition. Or wrapping something around one's head, either to encompass or to wrap around your head, right? Like a turban. Other possible definitions. So he says, first of all, what does it mean? What does this word mean? It means it goes around the head, right? It sort of wraps around the head, goes around the head. So why does he say placed it on the head first? Why not say it's wrapped totally around? So he says, I don't understand. Why don't you use the right definition for this word? That's what he's basically asking. So he said, it could be. He's using this word in Aramaic. Right now, he's saying that this word in Aramaic may not mean the same thing. Right? This word in Aramaic, maybe there is no word in Aramaic to describe it. To describe surrounding the entire head. So, because another place he says in Isaiah chapter 3, verse 23, the Aramaic translation, the Targum Yonasam ben Uziel, use a different word. He doesn't use the same word. And both don't mean the same thing, right? There could be, just maybe it means this over there, but maybe not the same. Right? So he's bothered. He's bothered why I use that word. Maybe that's not what the word means. Or maybe that's what it means in that, in that place, but other places mean something different. Right? So the Ramban over here disagrees. Right? He tries to answer up for Onkelos because, he says, maybe that's the only word that you use. And if that's the only word he used, maybe, maybe it can mean a number of different things. Does that mean something very specific? Maybe it means in general. Right? So explains the Ramban. Now comes along the Kli Yakar. Comes along the Kli Yakar over here. And the Kli Yakar says like this. He says that there's a benefit, not only a benefit of getting atonement, wearing these vestments. Right? And Aaron and the high priest going in to see God's face, so to speak, once a year. He's saying it's not just about atonement. That's what it sounds like. In other words, Aaron goes in, and we're going to see by the two goats, the atonement for him and his family, atonement, one of them for the sake of all the Jewish people. So it sounds like, what's the whole point? He's going in the Holy of Holies. It's all about atonement. Right? That's what it sounds like. Comes on the Kli Yakar and he says, no, it's not just about seeing God's face, so to speak, once a year. But really, what's the point over here? What's the point of everything? Over here is in order to strengthen people in Amunah. That God appears himself to the Jewish people on Mount Sinai. He appeared himself on Mount Sinai in order that they should entrench it on their hearts the first two of the 10 Commandments. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, book of Exodus, chapter 20, verse 2. I am the Lord your God, took you out of Egypt, and you shouldn't have any other false gods before me. You shouldn't have any gods made out of silver, gold, whatever. So here, what are we going to be reminded of? Not just it's about atonement. It's about the fact that the Kohen Gadol goes in once a year, and the fact that he's going to bring Amunah to himself and everyone else. Because what's he really doing? He's saying that God, the Jewish people, appeared on Mount Sinai. Right? He's saying that God appeared on Mount Sinai to entrench in us what? The belief he runs the world. And he took us out of Egypt. That's what we just commemorated. That he took us out of Egypt. And every year, what does he want to do? Right? God himself wants the high priest to come in. He's the messenger. The high priest is the messenger of the Jewish people. He's going to come in once a year, the high priest, i.e. into the Holy of Holies, in order to strengthen, to renew their faith in him in the first of the 10 Commandments. The first two of the 10 Commandments, the essence of what the 10 Commandments are. Right? Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I'm the Lord your God. How do I know? Because he took us out of Egypt. He took us out of the house of bondage. But it's only him. Can't have any other gods before me, God says. So what's he saying? It's not just about atonement. Now, this whole chapter, or a lot of it, has to do with Yom Kippur, atonement for the Jewish people, atonement for the high priest and his family. But he said it's not all about that. Because if you would ask most people, and isn't that what it's about? That's what it's about. No question, that's what it's about. If that's, he's saying, Okay, that's part of the story. That 100% is part of the story. But he's saying there's another part of the story. And that is to strengthen each and every one of us in the entire Jewish people, the fact that God runs the world, to renew our faith in him, that correspond to these first of the 10 commandments, these first two, that are the essence of faith of God, and belief in him. So now, that's an amazing thing. Because if you'd ask most people, okay, tell me what most of this chapter is about, right? We're going to, we'll go through it, but what's most of the chapter about? They're going to say it's about Yom Kippur. And it's about atonement. Comes on the Kli Yakar and he says not so fast. That is true. Not denying that. That for sure is true. But he's saying it's also there to renew our belief in him. The belief in God, first two of the 10 commandments. He runs the world. He's in charge. Can't have any other gods before him. Takes a step further. He says, maybe God forbid the Jewish people transgressed one of the 10 commandments, don't kill. Maybe God forbid they transgressed one of the 10 commandments, don't commit adultery. And these two, interesting enough, correspond to the first two of the 10 commandments. You're going to say, Ma Kesher. You're going to say, what's the connection? Right? What's the connection over here? What's the connection between Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, took you out of Egypt. Don't have any other gods before me. And don't kill and don't commit adultery. Right? What's the connection? He says, we already explained before in the book of Acts chapter 32, verse 6, right? Talking about the sin of the golden calf over there. He says you have to wear this ketones that was made out of linen, that is holy. Why? What does the ketones atone for? What is the ketones, this vestment, what's it used for? What's the purpose? Says the Gemara in Erchin 16a, tells me what does it atone for? Shvichus damim. What's shvichus damim? Murder. Going God to war that to atone for people committed murder. And the Kohen Gadol wears pants, right? Not going to walk around in shorts, right? It's got to be modest. But what's the purpose of wearing pants? He says, what does it atone for? Gilui Arayos. Immorality. So now I got two things going on over here. What does the Torah tell me? Torah tells me he's going to wear this ketones and he's going to wear the pants. What is he wearing them for? Because we already explained. Says the Kli Yakar. We already know from the Gemara in Erchin. One is against murder. One of them is against immorality. In order that what? They won't go totally against the first two of the 10 commandments. I.e., I'm the Lord God who took you out of Egypt. And don't have any other gods before me. That you should make a new covenant. Right? Every year. Right? New covenant, meaning it's a renewal of the old covenant. No such thing as a new covenant. Right? Regardless of what the non-Jews try and tell you. There is no new covenant. Right? Regardless of what it says, Jeremiah chapter 30. Can't go against what Moshe Rabbeinu says. Can't add or subtract to what the Torah says. Right? So therefore, if you're renewing the covenant, which it says at the beginning of chapter 30, the book of Jeremiah, it means you're renewing the old covenant. Not that there's such a thing as a new covenant. The new covenant means you're renewing the old one. That's what it means. Now, comes on the Kli Yakar. We mentioned this many times. Kli Yakar over here says, Avodah Zarah, when it comes to idolatry, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God himself punishes even by machshav, even by a person's thoughts. So if a person, God forbids, in their mind, they don't have to say a word. All they have to say is Bob, JC, whoever, this is my God. They say it in their mind. They don't bow. They don't give libations. They don't do any of the things that are forbidden for idolatry. They think it in their mind. JC is my God. The short little fat guy, Mr. Buddha, they probably won't call him short little fat guy, but we'll make fun of idolatry because it's mitzvah to make fun of idolatry. He's got no power. So you say, person will say, I believe in fatso over here. Good luck. You're in trouble. You're in trouble because you get punished by your thoughts. Says Kli Yakar explicitly. You get punished by your thoughts, by idolatry. He says, therefore, we have the avnates, we have this belt, this sash that he ties himself up with. Right? What does that come to atone for? Comes to atone for Hir or Halev. What's Hir or Halev? Bad thoughts. See, some people will say, and I had this argument with somebody, I wanted to debate him, but it didn't happen. I said, how can this person say, meaning me, this was many, many years ago, how could he say you get punished for your thoughts? That's exactly what the Avnei was for. You dimwit. That's what it's for. It's there to atone for bad thoughts. And what if you don't act on the bad thought? What if you don't act on it, but you think about it a lot? That's forbidden. If you had a bad thought, you get rid of it straight away. Different issue. But if a person's thinking about it, he's punished. Oh, if he's not punished for his thoughts, why does he wear the avnates? Why does he wear this belt? Oh, he's never punished by his thoughts. Come on. It says explicitly over here. He's punished for his thoughts. Hir or Halev. What does Hir or Halev mean? His thoughts. Thoughts of his heart. What are thoughts of a person's heart? What he thinks. That's what it is. You tell me, but I'm in control. I didn't do anything. I didn't act on it. I didn't bow down to anything or whatever. Doesn't matter. You thought about it. You said it in your mind. You had other thoughts, bad thoughts, whatever they are. Finished. You're punished. Otherwise, what's the avnei for? That's exactly what it's for. Now, how can a person say you're not punished for your thoughts? Says explicitly over here. And for this, now we get a little bit juicier here. For this, the children of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, are punished. Why? Because they looked at God's presence with an uplifted heart, with a conceited, a haughty heart. Therefore, the high priest wears the mitznefes, and he wears it in order to atone for what? Gaiva. Being conceited. See, there's a lot going on over here. A lot of things the Kohen Gadol's wearing. People say, oh, come on, what is he wearing it for? Who cares what he wears in this? We don't even have a high priest today. We don't have the temple today. Doesn't matter. Look what's going on over here. Right, again, he's wearing the ketones, right, to atone for murder. He's wearing pants to atone for immorality, right? Because, again, a person's punished for thoughts, and he wears the belt to atone for bad thoughts, and this is what the mitznefes is all about, to atone for being conceited. Now, being conceited is never good. Even according to the Rambam would say You go so far away, but you want to meet somewhere in the middle. You want to go to the middle path, not on this. When it comes to gaiva, right? When it comes to being conceited, there is no middle path. That's you go away from like the plague. Totally like the plague. We have no connection to it whatsoever. Gaiva, as the Orthodox Tzaddikim in the ways of the righteous says, in the gate of being conceited, gate of Gaiva, he says over there, it's the source of all bad character traits. Every bad character trait a person, God forbid, may have, that's where it's said. Now, a person may say, come on, doesn't a person need self-esteem? Isn't that one of the single biggest threats today to the Jewish people, that we have no self-esteem, very little self-esteem? Not talking about people who don't keep Torah mitzvahs. Not about people who do keep Torah mitzvahs. Right? They don't have such great self-esteem. So I heard a great rabbi once say, he said this many years ago, many years ago. He said, it's a disease in this generation that people don't have self-esteem. So he said, we have to build up our kids and others, compliment them left and right. Build them up so they have self-esteem. Not that they're conceited, but they should have self-esteem. They should feel good about themselves. They should feel good about Torah that they learn, whatever level, and mitzvahs that they do. They should feel good, even if it's hard. So I asked the question, okay, if that's true, we're building them up, we're telling them how great they are. Aren't they going to be gaivadik? Aren't they going to be conceited? He says, don't worry, if that would be the case, I can help with that also. But he said that's not the case. In his experience, he says 9.9 out of 10 have the opposite problem. Lack of self-esteem. Got to build people up. So he says that was the punishment. I mean, we spoke in many weeks what potentially the punishment was by Nadav and Aviv. Here they hit such an epiphany, and they thought, you're right, we're not allowed to go in the Holy of Holies. But even so, on such an auspicious day, they want to draw so close to God, they say, let's go in. Let's do it anyway, even though we're not commanded. And God took their lives. God took their lives over here. But they did it for the sake of heaven. True. But there's a certain level of conceitedness, some level, small level, whatever it is. Even though they did it for the sake of heaven, says the Kliyakar, they were taken for that reason. Seemingly, they thought they knew better. Very hard to understand. So we've spoken about this idea. We're not interested in reinventing the wheel. We had this with Abraham. With Adam and Eve. And Adam says, if I put evil inside of me, every time I do the right thing, exponentially, my soul's going to rise and my body's going to rise. Spiritually, it'll be a tremendous thing. If I do the wrong thing, God forbid, okay, I can fall down both ways, soul and body. But I can, a person can reach such a high spiritual level in a short amount of time and get a tremendous amount of reward. What did God say? God called him a heretic. Why? Because he said, I didn't create the world for that. It's not what I wanted. He says, you're right. He didn't disagree. But he said, that's not what I created the world for. I didn't want you to do that. Okay, now you did it. Now I got to go to plan B. What's plan B? Death. Brought death to the world. Totally brought death to the world. So Adam thought he knew better. Adam thought he knew better over here. The result is catastrophic. Catastrophic. So here they also thought they knew better. They said, well, God's really going to mind if we come in and take a sneak peek? Not during the year. Not during Yom Kippur. And God's going to think, we're going to get punished. They didn't think such a thing. They had such a high spiritual level, unbelievable epiphany at this point. They jump in. Very, very hard to understand. because there's no command to do it. Not allowed to do it. How do they think God's going to understand? So I mentioned before, the Or Chaim HaKadosh, a blessed memory, more than 100 years ago, said, why are they punished? Because they're very close to the king. And when you do a minor infraction, even though God said it's for the sake of heaven, to L'Shem Shamayim, totally for the sake of heaven, okay? Very good. What's the problem? He didn't tell them to do it. He didn't want them to do it. They thought they understood better. But the fact that you're so close to the king, he said you get burnt. And they got burnt. So he says over here, that was the sin over here. The sin was gaiva at some level. Right? Hard to say. Very, small thing over here. Very, very small, fine thing over here. But he said at some level, it's gaiva. Because they thought they could see God when they wanted. In the Holy of Holies. God says, who do you think you are? You can come in whenever you want. There's a reason the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, only comes in once a year. There's a reason Passover is only once a year. Shavuot is only once a year. Right? Sukkot, the other holidays that, we only have certain times during the year. Because then they're going to be very fresh. You're not going to take them for granted. That's the whole point. Imagine if they went to the Holy of Holies all the time. Take God's presence for granted. God didn't want that. Right? So he didn't want that. So therefore what? Therefore he didn't want them to be rugged to do this on a regular basis. Because then they're going to get used to certain things and then they're really in trouble. So here God spread it out. You have this sphere of influence, at this time, another holiday, another time, this, that, but it's only certain times of the year. It's not every day. Imagine you had Hanukkah every day. Take it for granted. We had certain other, holidays over longer periods of time. You wouldn't take it for granted. So to go in this auspicious time, one day a year, God said that's enough. Not twice, not 3 times, not 5 times, not 10 times, one day a year. That's it. You don't have a chance to go in any other time. Says the Or Chaim further. If I want to explain it differently. What are these 4 vestments? He says these 4 vestments are vestments that the sons of Aaron made a mistake in. He says the ketonis and the avnei. The Medrash says that the sons of Aaron were walking after Moshe and Aaron, and they said, "When are these 2 elders? When are they going to die? And we're gonna be in charge." He said, how can they say such a thing? So one of the rabbis, Rabbi Ivo, said, no, they actually said it. Rabbi Pinchas said, no, they only thought it. They never said it. So the question is, Medrash asks, or the Kliyakar is asking over here, what are they arguing about? What? One said it? One thought it? Who cares? What's the argument? Right? Very interesting thing. In general, forget about whether he said it or they thought it. Even if they thought it, what were they thinking? You really think the sons of Aaron are saying, these old geezers, my language, oh, I can't wait for them to die so we can take over. You think two of the holiest people in the history of Jewish people waiting for these 2 old fogies to die so they can take over? Hard to imagine. Right? One explanation, possible explanation, is the fact that they were so lofty. Moshe and Aaron are so lofty, they need the younger generation to be able to deal with the people. right? The way they're thinking they're on such a high level, who can relate to them? Now, we saw before, Book of Deuteronomy seems to say, not of an Avihu on a higher level. They're on a higher level over here. But regardless, it's hard to imagine simple explanation. That's what they said. When are they going to die? There has to be obviously something more behind what they said. Not just, we can't wait for them to die so we can take power. Right? So we can take over. Because they thought the people weren't fitting to be able to listen to Moshe and Aaron. To a higher level to reach, God's going to zap them. So we're in a lower level. So let us rule. So it'll be easier for the people. One possible explanation. So he said, okay, so he asked the question, who cares? They thought it, they said it, what's the difference? They want to explain, according to Rabbi Boy, who said they actually said it. He said, what's the ketonas bads? Right, this linen. Right, this linen thing over here, this sacred linen. Right, this ketonas. He said, what's it coming to atone for? It's coming to atone for what? Murder. Now, what's the obvious question? Where do you say by the sons of Aaron? Where do you say they murdered anyone? Where's murder over here? So he says, for sure they said it with their mouths. So where's murder? Because what are they guilty of? Malbim Panei Moshe Aaron. They embarrassed Moshe and Aaron, saying that they're not fitting to be leaders because they're old. Embarrassed them by saying these two old people, they can't lead anymore. We have to lead. And Amalbim Chaverod, Chashiv Keshov Chev Damim. And someone who embarrassed someone, they embarrassed their friend. Well, not going to be so much your friend anymore. Right, but that's the language here. You embarrass your friend in public, that's like murder. Rabbeinu Yonah and Shari Tshuva and Gate to Repentance. What does Rabbeinu Yonah say? He says murder, if a person, God forbid, murders somebody, premeditated, murders them, that is not, you don't lose your portion of the world to come. Others disagree. He says you don't lose your portion of the world to come. But you embarrass someone in public, which is maybe similar to murder, because the person turns white, then they turn red. Right? Red meaning blood. They get totally embarrassed. Anyone's ever been embarrassed in public, they understand. Or they've been ever embarrassed in general. It's like you murdered somebody. Then Rabbeinu Yonah Chiddush. Tremendous novelty, Rabbeinu Yonah says. Rabbeinu Yonah says, you embarrass somebody, you forfeit your portion of the world to come because you murdered them. It's like murder. So what's the obvious question, Rabbeinu Yonah? The obvious question is, if murder itself, you're not guilty for losing a person. You are guilty, but you don't lose your portion of the world to come if you actually murder someone. Here's something similar to murder. How can you lose your portion of the world to come? Very hard to understand. Not everyone agrees with him. But he's saying, what's the comparison? What's the comparison? Nadav and Avihu got murdered. They murdered Moshe and Aaron because they embarrassed them in public. They embarrassed them by saying, when are these old guys going to die? So we can take over. That's similar to murder. So therefore comes on the ketoines to atone for murder. So since Aaron is going to come, do the service for Yom Kippur, lest you think he sinned over here. Because the sons were dirty with sin. They sin over here. So we want to make sure Aaron does not have any, sniff of this sin when he was going to go into the Holy of Holies. So that's one explanation. According to Rav Ivo said, they actually said it. So that's akin to murder. That's akin to drawing blood, killing. Similar. What about Rav Pinchas? Rav Pinchas said they thought it in their hearts. Okay, they didn't say it. Now, they wore the avnates in order to atone for what? What did we say before? Here or halev. Things that they thought. Things that they thought. So therefore, that's what they thought in their hearts. So comes along Rav Ivo and says, what was he wearing the avnate for? What's the high priest wearing it for? This sash in order to atone for what? Bad thoughts. Immoral thoughts. Where's the immoral thoughts by sons of Aaron? How do they have immoral thoughts? How do they have immoral thoughts over here? Because one of the things that the Talmud says, one of the possible reasons why they sinned over here is for the fact of what? They were never married. They never got married. And someone who's not married, his heart is full of transgression. Now you're going to say, what? Someone who's not married, that's what all his thoughts are? A guy who's not married, he's going to have a lot of bad thoughts. That's just the nature of, a guy, right? He's going to have these thoughts. But he says explicitly here, somebody's not married, that's what he does. That's where his mind is. Right? Don't people say, some people, I don't know how many, doesn't really matter. What do they say? I can't even going to bring this up, right? I remember when I was younger, way back when, what did they say? Adidas, the sports shoes, sneakers. What did Adidas stand for? You know what Adidas stands for? All day I dream about sex. That's what it stands for, right? That's what people said it stands for, right? I don't know, guy talk, right? Whatever it is, we're not gonna digress here. But he says clear, someone who's not married, that's where his mind is. It might not be all the time, certainly a lot of the time. It's where his mind's gonna be, right? He says, person who's not married is going to be filled with these bad thoughts. I mean, it could happen to someone who's married also. Definitely could happen. But obviously, much more common, someone who's not married. Right? It's why, certainly in the Orthodox community, people get married younger. In the Hasidic community, even younger. Guys get married 18, 18, 19. In the Orthodox community, usually in their early 20s, usually 22, 23. Something like that. But this is a serious issue. Someone's not married. So comes along Rav Pinchas. Rav Pinchas says that what is the ketonus atone for? Murder. Why murder? What does murder have to do with the fact they're not married? Oh, I'm going to keep this clean. Right? What does it atone for? Murder. Why? Because since they weren't married, and they're not always taking privy and rivia, they're not having relations to have children. Therefore, it's as if they spill blood. Now, other people spoken about this quite a bit, right? And I'm not going to dwell into it, but Someone who spilled seed, right? I mean, there is atonement. I mean, pretty harsh atonement, but someone who spills seed over here, certainly a guy, right? Murder is considered murder. How do I know? Where do we know it from? Because the Gemara in Yevamos 53b says, name of Rebbe Eliezer, right? Tanya, Rebbe Eliezer Omer, Toshen Osek for privy review, Kilu Shofik Domi. Somebody who's not, with his wife or with a woman, let's say in general, to have children, better obviously with his wife, right? If he's not married, that's what it means over here. He's not married. It's forbidden to be with a woman outside your wife, right? Certainly for a Jew. Whatever. It's as if he spilled blood. It's as if he spilled blood over here. How do I know? Says the Gemara in Yevamos. I got an explicit verse in the Torah. Torah tells me, Genesis chapter 9, verse 6. Shofek tav Adam. It says, he that spills blood, right? A person spills blood. It says in verse 7, Atem pru orvu. And you should go out, be fruitful, and multiply. That's the command by Parshas Noah. To be fruitful and multiply, not by Adam and Eve. I mean, most people make that mistake. They think, oh, God said to Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply. That's not the command. The command's over here in Parshas Noah. And he says, that's what it's talking about. So this it says talking about spilling blood. I've juxtaposition of the verse in order to tell me that another verse tells me you're coming to what? To be fruitful and multiply. I.e., if you're not being fruitful and multiply, you're accused of murder. So what happens? Let's say you have someone Jewish. I got this question before. You have someone in the process of conversion, and they tell me, they tell me they're married, wife can't have kids. So what do you do? Now, according to the code of Jewish law, Shulchan Aruch tells me, if a person's with his wife 10 years, doesn't have children, can divorce her. Where do we learn out? From Abraham. Abraham's, was Sarah 10 years. She doesn't have children. He could have divorced. Right? So it takes Hagar. Right? But technically a person can do that. So a person asked me, what should I do? So I said, are you happily married? He said, yeah. So I said, I wouldn't tell you to get divorced. He said, but I want to have kids. I want to have my own kids. She's not going to give me kids over here. She can't give me children. So I said, it's like a mitzvah. You never did. And if you never ate matzah on Passover, you didn't do it. A person who didn't put on tefillin, phylacteries, whatever you want to call it, in their entire life, they didn't do the mitzvah. Shiluach HaKain, sending away the mother bird. Let's say you never did that. And you never took the eggs and shoot away the mother bird. So you didn't do the mitzvah. It's something you didn't do. So that's what I said. It'll be like something you didn't do in your lifetime. But it's a very important mitzvah. Okay. But if you didn't do it, you didn't do it. Would I tell somebody because they couldn't have kids to get divorced? Wouldn't say that. Not if they're happily married. If they're unhappily married, different issue. Totally different issue. Right? But if they're happily married, there are other problems come with this. I know someone told the story. I didn't hear the whole story. Right? I only saw, a small snippet where, they converted. This person converted. His spouse didn't want to convert. And he's very happy that he converted. Right? But he said it ruined his life. Essentially ruined his life. He said in the end, he's happy he converted. But it came at a price. And it seems that's why they got divorced. It wasn't other reasons. That's what it sounded like. I wasn't privy to all the information, but that's what it sounded like. So now, somebody like that, the other spouse doesn't want to convert. This person dying to convert. And they get divorced. The person ends up converting. Okay. I don't think most people are going to tell them to do that. I certainly wouldn't tell them to do that unless there are other issues. If there are other issues, different story. Right? It's a totally different issue. But if everything more or less is fine and they're happily married, I wouldn't say that. So again, what happens if the person didn't have kids? They didn't have kids. Someone asked me, non-Jew asked me this. I did not want to have kids. I chose not to have kids. Is that, am I in trouble for that? Well, the Torah tells me, being fruitful and multiply is a general command, but it's a general command for all mankind. Non-Jews should have kids. Now, they have to populate the world. Because if you don't have kids, guess what? You don't have a next generation. The world's going to go to pot, won't survive. Now, does that mean they have to have 10 kids? No. That means, can they have kids spread out? Yeah. A couple years, 3 years, 5 years. What about, birth control? Yeah. A lot of issues here. Certainly for Jews, a different issue. But non-Jews should have kids. Doesn't matter how many, but they should have kids populate the world. Now, again, certain things that we don't do. Okay, so a person didn't do it. You won't get credit for doing it. But you're going to think, come on, it's a pretty serious thing. Get married, have kids. Not everyone merits such a thing. In this world, it's a big miracle if anyone gets married anyway, in general, because most marriages end up in divorce. Much safer to live together. You live together, you got a better chance of staying together than not. You get married, that's it. 60% divorce rate, higher. People, married multiple times. Right? It's the institution itself, quote unquote, doesn't seem to work today. At least in the secular world. Definitely doesn't seem to work. The fact that people want to get married in general, I think, is a miracle. Anyone who wants to get married in the secular world, not based on Torah. Why would they want to get married for? Just to have a piece of paper? As non-Jews, a lot easier. You live together, you don't have to worry about it. You walk out, fine. That's considered divorce. But Jews is a different issue. Right? But the institution of marriage itself is tremendous danger. And how are you going to define marriage? That's a whole other issue. Not even going to get to. Right? I don't want to digress here. But the point is, okay, so a person didn't do the mitzvah. You're right. They didn't do the mitzvah. They didn't do it. It's a mitzvah they didn't do. And there were some very great people that didn't have children. Wasn't their choice. They're very great people. They weren't gifted with children. Didn't mean they didn't try, but, it never happened. So, in that sense, I can understand. Someone worked at it, didn't happen, different issues, whatever. Okay, they didn't merit. So, what should they do? In theory, they could get divorced. It's on the books. After 10 years, you get divorced. I don't think the vast majority do, if that's the case. It depends on other issues going on, right? But, someone's married, had a happy marriage, everything else, it's a mitzvah they didn't do. For a guy, it's a lot worse, right? That's really the point here. For a guy, it's 10 times worse. That's why we marry off younger. Certainly in the Hasidic community, even younger. Because it's very prevalent, right? Because the Kli Yakar is telling you if you're not married, your evil inclination is going to go wild. Totally wild. And you got to work very hard to control it. Very, very hard. So he says, if not, what do you end up doing? You end up spilling seed. Spilling seed, murder. And that's potential life. According to Kabbalah, pretty scary. All these unborn children a person potentially could have had through that. Going to come back to bite you later. So, I'll worry about it later. I don't think you want to worry about it later. Right? But, again, I'm not going to go too much into it. The point is, it's considered like murder. So he says, wearing the pants, these linen pants, what does that atone for? Immorality. Why? Why is it about immorality? Because he says when wine goes in, right, the Gemara in Eruvin says the person can be tested in 3 ways. The person can be tested by koso, kaso, kiso. Koso, how much he drinks, what comes out of his mouth. Right? What comes out of his mouth? Kiso, how they deal with money. And kaso, how they get angry. So it says, Kuyakar over here, that the pants atone for immorality. Because when a person drinks, what happens when a person drinks? When a person drinks, he doesn't have inhibitions. He doesn't have inhibitions. So if he doesn't have inhibitions, he'll do things that normally he wouldn't normally do or say. What is that going to lead to? Immorality. How do most, again, we're going to try and keep this clean. People hook up one with another, male and a female, we'll keep it simple. A lot of times what happens, they're both drinking, or at least somebody's drinking. I'm not going to say all the time. I don't know what the statistics are. So people, I don't want people hammering me and say, oh, you think it's this or that. A lot of times, what a person would normally do, a person normally wouldn't do certain things unless, they're under the influence. It doesn't mean you have to drink a lot. All it has to do is relax the person. They, a cup of wine, couple shots, whatever, relaxes the person. And, it chills them out a little bit, let's say. What does that lead to? Immorality. Right? It's telling you it leads to immorality. So when a person drinks, again, it doesn't have to be a guy over here. A woman, also drinks, can lower her level of inhibition. In other words, not afraid to do certain things or say certain things because now she's also under the influence. It usually probably helps both are under the influence. You don't necessarily need that. As long as one is, they're doing things they wouldn't normally do. In general. In that, in a number of ways, in some ways, I'm not going to say happens, all the time. But a lot of times, when do people hook up? That's when they hook up. When they're drinking. He says that's what it leads to. He says when wine enters, a person is much more susceptible to immorality. And then he says the mitznefes, this head covering, he says, what does it atone for? Being conceited. And this, he says, includes many, many sins. Many, many sins. Because he says the rabbis tell us that being conceited, that many transgressions come from it. And that's what happened when they wanted to look at God's presence. That's what happened. They went out of their minds, so to speak. For good, not necessarily saying for bad. But God said no. So he says, and this is what it means also, they wanted to explain Jewish law in front of Moshe. In other words, if it's something explicit, the halacha is that you could say what the halacha is even if your rabbi lives in the same city. Right? But if it's something not like that, you got to ask him permission. And say, if someone comes to me and they ask me this question, can I answer? Do you mind? And most likely they'll probably say no. Right? But he said there are lots of transgressions over there as I mentioned before in chapter 10, in Parshas Shmini, a lot of different transgressions. So he brought out a number, right? He talked about immorality. He talked about murder. He talked about being conceited. So he says they wanted to look at God's presence, not of an view. They want to look at God's presence and they're filled with sin. And how can Aaron go in? How can Aaron go in the Holy of Holies? They're filled with sin. You got to be careful. That's what he's being warned about. And that's why he's got to wear these 4 clothing, these 4 vestments, in order to cleanse him of these sins. Pretty amazing thing to think about. How this corresponds to this, to that. That's why I went through the whole thing. Right? And the last thing being, conceited, thinking they can see God when they want. Right? And that they weren't allowed to do. And they have to punish for. But, you see how this corresponds. And so says the Kli Yakar, God tells them, okay, you're going to wear these 4 vestments. Can't wear the gold. Right? The gold's accusing here. Can't wear the gold. But here you're going to wear the linen. And these 4 vestments of linen are what? They're going to save you from all these sins of your sons. And you'll be able to go in the Holy of Holies unscathed. So explains Kli Yakar. Somebody asked, take some questions now. Ways of the righteous. We mentioned that the ways of the righteous says that the Gaiva, in the gate of Gaiva, is, he says that it's the source of all sin, right? It's the source of all sin, right? The question here is who's the author, and we don't know. We don't know who the author is. It's unknown, right? Something that is something that's unknown. We don't know who it is. I don't even think we have a guess who it is, right? But we don't know who it is. But if you get a copy of the Ways of the Righteous, right? Very good book to go through. Definitely a good book to go through. But we don't know who the author is. I don't even think we have a clue who the author is. Somebody asks, that the slave owner, totally off topic question here, circumcises his non-Jewish slaves to partake of the Passover Seder. Right? That's Exodus chapter 12, verse 44. Right? Because an uncircumcised male cannot eat of the Paschal offering. Right? That's what the Torah says. So really, non-Jews should not eat the last piece of matzah at the Passover Seder. They had a Passover Seder. I don't think, people are going to be too stringent on it, but that's what it represents. So they're not allowed, right? A non-Jew is not allowed to eat the Paschal offering. True. Does the slave automatically part of Israel? No. He doesn't necessarily be part of Israel, even though he's circumcised. You can have someone who's a ger tosha. He could be a ger tosha, right? Meaning that he lives in the land, he goes against idolatry, he holds by the Noahide laws, and gives us our obligation to uphold them, to sustain them. If they get stuck, they're in trouble, whatever the case is. Right? So they have that status. We don't have ger tosha today because we don't have the Jubilee year. So no such thing as a ger tosha, but does not make them a Jew. Definitely does not make them a Jew. Are they family of the slave owner? They are technically. They are technically family. I mean, the slave himself, because punishment of stealing, right? He has to be with a non-Jewish woman, and slave owner takes the children. So yeah, he's owned, but he also goes free. So he's not really, even if he's circumcised, doesn't mean he can't go free. Right? There are cases where he wouldn't go free, but in general, it doesn't necessarily mean he's totally 100% part of the family where he wouldn't go free. Somebody asks as well, this week's parsha, we just read Acharei Mos, which I guess outside of Israel is going to read next week, and then we'll catch up, I don't know, at some point. at some point, because the second day of the festival, Passover was on Shabbos. Someone asked, why do people say Acharei Mot or Acharei Mos? Depends if you're Sephardic or Ashkenazi. If you're Ashkenazi, you say Acharei Mos. It means the same thing. Mos or Mot over here means death. Right? That's what it means. Acharei Mot, no difference. Right? That's not adding to the Torah. That's just pronunciation. Right? That's phonetics, as we would call it in the vernacular. Right? In other words, so if you see a tav, and it's got a dot in the middle, then everyone pronounces it like a tav. If it doesn't have a dot in the middle, Sephardic people will still say tav, like Acharei Mot. Some people will say Acharei Mos, right? Ashkenazim will say Acharei Mos. Sephardic people will say Acharei Mos. Is there any difference? No. Means the same thing. Right? That's not considered adding to the Torah. Not at all. It's just different pronunciation. Right? Different pronunciation does not take away from meaning in the Torah. Right? That's not what it does. It's just a different way of pronouncing it, but doesn't necessarily, it's not a question of adding or subtracting to the Torah. Adding or subtracting to the Torah means if I add an extra sitzes to my sitzes, that's adding. Or I take away one of the sitzes. Or I add an extra parsha my tefillin. Right? You add an extra parsha in there. Or whatever the case is. That's adding. I take away one, that's subtracting. Here by phonetics, how I pronounce things, that has nothing to do with anything. I mean, shouldn't say it has nothing to do with anything. It means that phonetically, it doesn't change the meaning. There aren't two Torahs over here. It's just a question of pronunciation. That's all it is. Right? Sephardic people will pronounce it with a tav. Ashkenazim with, it's an S sound. And it means the same. If you would tell me it means something else, you're right. Then it's like changing it. But since it doesn't really change anything, it's just a question of phonetics, then it's not an issue. Any other questions? All right, let's go a little bit further. See one thing here. One thing I just want to mention, you look at what the Torah says in general. Like we mentioned before, in the book of Exodus. What do we see by the book of Exodus? We see over there in chapter 28 about the vestments, about what the high priest wears. I'm not going to say we don't have any high priests. We don't have a temple. We don't have connection to such a thing. Many hold temple's going to be rebuilt. We'll go back to sacrifice. So these things, the vessels will come back. Some of them maybe in Rome, some here buried in Israel, whatever the case is, but we'll go back. We'll go back to that. But see, it's not something, obviously we have such a connection to. We don't have a connection to it. But what we brought out earlier from the Kli Yakar, he makes it pretty graphic. What things represent what they come to atone for, and what the connection is. Right? We saw an important thing here. That a person is punished for their thoughts. You need a vestment for that. Person can be punished if they're not married. Could be like murder. Person can be punished for that. Gaiva, being conceited. The base of all bad character traits. person can be punished for that. There's some people, unfortunately, they may walk around with a chip on their shoulder and think because they're Jewish and they're born Jewish and keep Torah mitzvahs, that makes them bad. Doesn't the Torah say we are a chosen nation? True. Because we chose God, he chose us. But the reality is, what differentiates a Jew from a non-Jew? Right? What do we read at the end of this parasha? We'll get there. I don't know, one day. At the end, it says, don't do, in chapter 18, verse 27, it says, don't do all the abomination the people of the land. This is why I had to drive them out. Right? They impurified the land. So you don't get spit out of the land. You don't make it impure. You don't want to go and do all these terrible things. In verse 30, keep what I told you to keep. Right? And keep all the laws, even if they don't make sense. And don't make yourself impure. Why not? Because I'm the Lord your God. What's the purpose of Torah mitzvahs? The purpose of Torah mitzvahs is to draw a person close. A person themselves has to realize, either as the Rambam says in the 13 Principles of Faith, says at the very beginning, right? There's absolute. God is absolute. And if he's not absolute, then I can do what I want. Because no reward and punishment. No nothing. But what's the point? The point is, I'm supposed to draw close to him. That's what God wants. And I'm supposed to do it by keeping Torah mitzvahs. If not, I'm in trouble. So there are a lot of things going on. What my obligation is. And I saw over the holiday that for Victor Miller, a blessed memory, someone asked him, how do you give over this enthusiasm to kids? Enthusiasm to keep Torah mitzvahs. So let's say a little bit different. How do we ourselves keep that fire lit? Not easy, right? As we mentioned many times. Right? Certainly not easy. So he says, we have to encourage others, encourage ourselves. Nothing more important than what I'm doing right now. Nothing more important than learning Torah. But I can't get distracted. And how do I push away darkness? How do I push away darkness? I push away darkness with a little bit of light. That light is Torah. You're gonna say, I'm tired, my brain's tired, this, that. The evil inclination has a million ways to get us. A million ways to get us. And we always have to be prepared. Because if you're not prepared, we're toast. My language. Right? The Torah tells me, or the Gemara says, that there's an antidote to the evil inclination. That's called learning Torah. But learning Torah is not enough if you don't have God's help. God's help, without God's help, all the Torah learning in the world not going to help you. Seemingly not going to help. So you can say, well, I'm stuck. Nowhere to go. How do I fight this off? So what did he say before? Kliyaka here said, the whole point over here is not just about atonement. You say, but the whole part is talking about atonement. It's all talking about Yom Kippur. True. But he says it's a time to entrench yourself in Amun and Bitachon. Belief and faith in God. And the fact that he runs the world. The fact that he's in charge. That's what Passover is all about. We're renewing our belief and faith in God that he runs the world. How do I know he runs the world? Because he intervenes in history. How do I know he intervenes in history? Exodus chapter 20, verse 2. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I'm the Lord your God, took you out of Egypt. Took you out of the house of bondage. That's how I know. That's how I know. So you spend the whole week going through different explanations, of what the plagues, of what happened. A lot of good things to look at. While we're busy doing other things also. To renew. It's about renewal of faith. And the fact that God runs the world. Because when we look at the world, it's upside down. God's ways are totally hidden. Hidden within hiddenness. And that fifth cup for Elijah the prophet is all about future redemption. That there will be future redemption, which will eclipse anything that happened in Egypt. So, okay, I'm ready. Let's see. Let's go. We also have to, be able to survive also. But at the same time, it reinforces what we already know. Reviewing what we know, not so much fun. Most people say, I want to learn new things. But you know what? We have to be entrenched in the mantras. I always say, God, you're the one in charge. You're the one in charge. Can't do anything without you. Can't do anything. Not body, not nothing. But you have to live it. River Victor Miller, blessed memory. Like rain, beautiful. Gives the earth what it needs, replenishes. You get springtime, brings things back to life. Weather a lot nicer. All kinds of things. Human body. You look at the world in general, miracle after miracle. And we partake in all this. So you can say, Rabbi, come on. There's living it and there's living it. Okay? And when the chips are down, we're all believers. We're all believers. And when things are going peachy keen, very smooth, we're the big believers then. Right? The work of my hands did all this. God did this, I did this. We forget. We forget until we realize what we don't have. When we don't have it, then we remember. By that time, God says, too late. You had an opportunity. I gave you an opportunity. You didn't take it. Now you're suffering. Now you're going through whatever. What happened to appreciation? Got to live it. So you're going to say, not an easy thing to do. I didn't say it was. According to some great people, it's an easy thing to do. What's our problem? We get beaten down in life. So we can't see the good. We have tremendous amount of good. Compared to previous generations, we're living in the lap of luxury. See what, all these pogroms, what people went through, had, uproot and, living in terrible places. Anti-Semitism left and right. Got all kinds of problems. Throughout our history, it's been that way. We're just living, the greatest ride of our lives right now. Kind of easier in so many different ways. But does that give us more time to learn, or do we waste more time? We don't take advantage. And we complain. And I'm not saying we don't necessarily have a right, whatever we're going through. Life is hard. But in the end, it's in the mind. It's how I view it. I'm not saying it's not hard. It might be, but you know what? What did the Chofetz Chaim say? Chofetz Chaim said, everything comes from God is good. So what about evil? Didn't God create evil? It says in Isaiah chapter 45, verse 7. God created evil. Doesn't mean God is evil. But guess what? We view things as being bad. We just don't know how to view the world. I'm not saying there are things that aren't bad. That, there can be terrible things that happen. Very true. Very, very true. But in the bigger scheme of things, there's a lot of good. And we forget. All you need is one little microbe to go, haywire in your body, flatten your back, can't move. You take a wrong turn, knee buckles, problem now with your leg, can't walk. We got to be more thankful for what we have. Show a lot more gratitude. Because I'm always fond of saying it should never happen to anyone, myself included. If God wanted to make it worse, it could be a lot worse. A lot worse. We're not asking for it. We don't want it. But we have to live. And we have to live the way he wants. It doesn't matter what he throws at us or what we do ourselves. Because guess what? Last Friday night, shut up and eat the matzah. That's what you got to do. Zohar says, we get judged on Rosh Hashanah, how we acted on Passover. Because that's the emunah for the entire year. The Seder at night, that's the emunah for the entire year. And if you blew it, well, according to Kabbalah, not very good. Even though we don't normally talk about Kabbalistic ideas. But that's how elevating the night can be. Unfortunately, so many people just go through the motions, rub it up double, let's eat, okay, a little bit of matzah, a little bit of wine, good, we're done. They missed the whole point. Not to mention it's probably on the wrong day. Right? But they probably missed the point. And there's so much to take from it. Yeah, you say, matzahs agree with me. How many things can you do with the potato? By festival and Shabbos, most of the things we ate were something to do with the potato. Right? A million things you can do with a potato, I guess. And other vegetables. But, okay. But we have to commemorate and think about what's really going on. See what happened in Ukraine. That turned upside down overnight. And hopefully the Jews get out and they're safe. We don't know one day to the next. King Solomon said in Proverbs, we have no idea what today's going to bring, what tomorrow's going to bring. Question is, what am I doing now? Where am I now? That's the important thing. I have to build on that. Sometimes people look at things, it's picky in detail, it's this and that, but what am I taking from it? Am I getting lost in the detail? Or am I trying to take something that's going to be everlasting and make it part of the rest of my life? And the rest of this year. And the influence that Passover can have. Now that influence is gone. We don't get it back. We have to wait till next Passover. Question is if we absorb the message enough. Probably, infused enough matzah, probably. Right, or, whatever. But, do we get the message? People say, I don't relate to it. It's 3,000 years ago, blah, blah, blah. It's the essence of what Judaism is. The fact that God intervenes in history. And the fact that if God wouldn't, we'd still be there. And we'd still be stuck there. No matter, maybe the Egyptians would have let us go. Maybe someone would have toppled them, whatever. Says Abba God, says God, that never would have happened. Never. Only because God took us out. That's the only reason. God had to come himself and do it. Because he takes the Jewish people, they were enslaved, takes them out in order to become a nation. And you have to train them. You got to work on their emunah. Their belief in him. What's the last thing they had to do before they went out? They had to kill their God in front of them. Put the blood on the doorpost. Pretty hard thing to do. They're like, Mo, come on, can we do anything else? No, you don't do this, you're out. You won't get out. But how can I kill their God in front of them? That's what you got to do. That's what God said. The ultimate in self-sacrifice. You show that, you're in. You don't show it, you're out. Because God wanted something over here. There are 2 times we mention blood. Throughout the night. One is, I managed to see a bris yesterday, circumcision, by circumcision and by this. Right? And by coming out of Egypt. The blood is significant. Self-sacrifice. That's what God wants. That's what God wants. And self-sacrifice can't come at a price. It absolutely can come at a price. And guess what? Whatever that price is, that's what it is. Family, other things. It can be a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, where do we see ourselves? You know, people will take fantasy, okay? Or like Rav Chaim of Volozhin says, in Nefesh Chaim, right, famous student of Vilna Gaon, Chaim Volozhin says our actions matter. Totally our actions matter. So since our actions matter, the repercussions, closer to the king, punishment more severe. We can say, I understand that. Very good. We have to realize there's payback. We get what God wants the best we can. That's what we have to do. We have to work hard. I can promise you, without a vow over here, but I can promise people give, you know, they're willing to do whatever it takes. Self-sacrifice, things change. Pathways open. Things change. Now, might not change overnight, but that's the mantra. God, okay, you want to put me through this? I'm not giving no. You want to put me through that? I'm not giving no. I'm here for the long haul. That means it's going to go smooth? No. It means you're going to get everything you need? What you think you need? No. Life itself is one big test. That's what it is. And the question is what I do with it and how I utilize it. It could be so bad, we're so depressed, we don't get out of bed. Yeah, it could be. Could be. Is that what God wants? No. And if people said things to us, did things to us, and they're in our heads, is that what God wants? No. Totally not. That's going to stop us from serving him. That's what it's going to do. Now, is it easy to get rid of these things? No. I'm not going to say it is. Sometimes we're petty. Sometimes, you know, why should we let certain people that aren't worth spit, why should we let them in our heads? Shouldn't. But you say they did this, they said that, they did. Okay. We're not denying any of this. Not denying people have been through hell and back. Not denying that at all. At some point, the person has to move on or find out a way to move on. Because if you don't move on, you're paralyzed. Totally paralyzed. And that for sure is not what God wants. We do it to ourselves also. We get bad habits and then whatever, we can't change. It's too hard, done it for so many years, this, that. But life itself is a test. That's what it is. Question is, are we up for the challenge or are we ready to, you know, throw in the towel? It's very easy to throw in the towel. Very, very easy. We may be justified 100%, maybe. But we make one very serious mistake. And the mistake is that the more good I do and the more I help others, that God owes me. That's a mistake. God doesn't owe us. Why should he give us a hoodsie, as we say in Boston, right? Small little Dixie cup made out of, has chocolate vanilla ice cream, eat it with a wooden spoon, right? Made by Hood. That's why it's called the hoodsie. God's going to say, I'll give you a hoodsie. I'll give you a treat over here. Give you a marshmallow. That's what you're created to do. I told you, got to keep Torah mitzvahs. That's what you got to do. You want, and you want a treat also. You want everything to go smooth. That's not how it works. People might think that's what they want and the way it should be, but it's not how it works. Question is, so the blessing I'll give everybody, myself included, is that whatever trials and tribulations we go through, we should be able to overcome them. That's the blessing of Moshe Schneider, a student, yeshiva student, came to him. He wanted a blessing. The Moshe Schneider asked him what blessing you want. And he said, I want the blessing, everything should go glass. Everything should go smooth. So Moshe Schneider said, I can't give you a blessing like that. That's a blessing in vain. He says, I'll give you a true blessing. The blessing is you'll have trials and tribulations, because everybody does. And the blessing is that you'll be able to overcome. That's the true blessing. No one goes out scot-free. Nobody. But it's how we deal with it. It's how we see the bigger picture. And even see the bigger picture. I get it. It's not easy. True. We have good days, we have bad days, whatever. But what's the only thing we have? What's the only thing right before the Messiah comes we hold on to? It's Torah. We don't have anything else. It's what strengthens us, what gives us life. When we turn the Torah to the ark, we say it's Chaim Ila Machzikim Bo. That the Torah is the tree of life to those that grab it. He feels that it grabs us, not we grab it. Right? Causative. Am I adding anything to the Torah? No. It's what the Torah is adding to me. It's what's putting inside me. The strength it's giving me in order for me to continue and go through whatever I have to go through. Right? That is a true blessing. I'm going to stop there. Any questions on any of that? Someone asked, when's the best time to say the counting of the Omer? Anytime after sundown. 30, let's say 20 minutes after sundown. So really, they should say it at the earliest time possible. Why? Because you might forget. But if you said it later, it's also good. Right? But a better time would be to say at the earliest possible time, which is about 20 minutes after sundown. Yeah, any other questions? All right, no other questions. I'm going to sign out. This is every Sunday, and we should be on a regular schedule now. 9 o'clock Eastern time, 4 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions, feel free. Shoot me an email, or if you want to set up a time to speak. Tanakh Talk up in the air right now. Not sure. You had some sort of meltdown. Software had nothing to do with me, so I'm not sure Tanakh Talk's actually going to happen. But otherwise, I'm going to sign out. Anyone wants to contact me, find me Michael Chaim Kaufman on Facebook or Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism. Send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN@gmail.com. Wishing everyone a good beginning of the day, middle of the day, depending where you are, and everyone has